You are a female surgeon.
I was a female surgeon.
Ah, right. Tell me what happened.
So basically, I was sexually assaulted at work by a colleague who, ironically, was more senior than me but less qualified than me. That's always the way. And I reported it to the trust, and the process of reporting it and the investigation that I went through was incredibly traumatic. And as a result, I left medicine.
Tell me how it was traumatic.
So basically, I initially went to my educational supervisor, who mentioned that it might be possible to deal with the problem informally, that such a complaint didn't need to wreck the perpetrator's career. He had no idea what to do. I then sought help from my union, which was the BMA, and they told me I needed to find the relevant policy. The hospital didn't even have a policy on sexual harassment. It was just a generic dignity at work policy. When I found it on the intranet, the link didn't work. It clicked through to a 404 file not found page, which in retrospect was probably a warning sign. I then contacted HR. They did nothing to progress my complaint. They didn't even make a note of it. It took 6 weeks to begin the investigation. They didn't fully suspend him. They actually offered him an extension to his contract when I reported the assault.
Can I ask, and if you don't wish to describe it, you absolutely don't have to, obviously, but what was the nature of the assault?
I was used to sexual harassment within surgery. It is the norm. Banter is the banter, in inverted commas, idiocy is the norm.
Otherwise known as idiocy, yeah.
Yeah, but this was really, it was stark, and it was very very predatory. So basically it was out of hours, and he lured me to an empty office that was locked, so you couldn't get in from the outside. Like, only he and some of his colleagues could get in. So I was essentially completely isolated. And there he basically started massaging me, kissing me, groping me, pinned me to a desk, wouldn't let me leave. You know, it was predatory. To sort of isolate someone in that way.
Oh, that's a serious sexual assault you've just described.
Yeah. And the response that I got from the trust was absolutely absurd.
How quickly did they say no reason to wreck his career?
So initially, the next day I contacted my educational supervisor, and he said, you know, we can just deal with this informally. We can sit down with this guy and have a chat. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you're going to have a chat with this guy who's deliberately lured me into an office and almost, essentially attempted to rape me.
Yeah.
This isn't a chat thing. Yeah. This is serious.
Do you know what else comes to my mind is a man who will do that will assault a patient.
Yes. Well, he was actually subsequently arrested for assaulting a child. So yes. A
patient's child.
No, it was a child outside of the hospital, but I seriously doubt that he suddenly started doing this in sort of summer 2020. I'm sure there must have been other people.
Of course.
Before, because, why would you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the drive in the investigation was all about sparing his career, was it?
So 6 weeks after I reported it, I was finally invited to an investigatory meeting. I didn't know at the time, but the investigator was a consultant. It was a female consultant in the hospital, and the entire training that she'd had before to investigate such assaults was a 2-hour course 16 months beforehand, and she couldn't remember any of it. During that investigatory meeting, I gave names of friends that I knew outside of the hospital, but I specifically requested that they not speak to my consultant colleagues, because I knew that putting in a report like that got you labelled as a troublemaker. It got you labelled as bad news. Now, the first thing that she did before she'd even taken a statement from the perpetrator was to then go to those consultant colleagues informally for telephone conversations where she asked them whether I was known to have inappropriate relationships with other people in the department. And one of them told me about this, and I raised a complaint against the investigator because I said that was clearly unacceptable. And they refused to get her removed from the investigation. The entire investigation, they didn't interview a single person who knew my perpetrator about him. He requested that nobody was spoken to about him, and they honoured his request. They discussed my clinical ability. They discussed whether I got behavioural issues. They discussed rumours about me, who I might or might not be sleeping with, whether I was known to have inappropriate relationships. And even after I put in a complaint about this, they continued to do so. In the end, they actually found that my perpetrator had no case to answer. And then that was subsequently changed after I put in an employment tribunal complaint. So.
And you left medicine completely?
Yeah, yes.
Did you fire a parting shot to the trust that you left?
I mean, I've missed some of the other things that went on here. Like the recording of my interview was leaked. It was attached to an email by accident, emailed around the hospital. There was a lot that happened that just
made staying there impossible for you, for your sanity.
It was absolutely impossible. And the point where I knew that she was asking these questions, that was so inappropriate to me. The point where I put in a complaint, and even at that point, they weren't going to listen to me. My firing shot was putting in an employment tribunal claim to them because, being sexually assaulted at work is one thing, but then going through an investigation which further harasses you because you've dared to be a young woman who reported it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who said, I will not put up with this.
Yeah, and to then be victim blamed by your organisation, by the trust,
Outrageous. Did you win?
Yes.
Hooray.
I did. Scant consolation. Really.
Well, I know. And did you love medicine?
I loved medicine. Oh, wow, yeah. I mean, I think surgery is one of those things that you can't be like half a surgeon. You can't do a bit of surgery. You either have to be all in or not. And I would go in on my annual leave. I'd go in on my days off. I'd, constantly be there for operations And like I say, there was always a culture of sexism kind of bubbling under the surface, whether that took the form of, overt harassment and assault, or whether it took kind of the form of diminishing you. I had colleagues who referred to me as their glamorous assistant, stuff like that. But I shrugged it off because I thought if I worked hard enough, they couldn't reduce me to just being a woman. If I worked hard enough, then I would be seen as a surgeon in my own right. And then this happened, and I realised that, you can be the best surgeon in the hospital, maybe not the best surgeon in the hospital, but you can work incredibly hard and you can get assaulted, and all they care about is
the man.
Well, yeah, and what
reputation.
Your relationships are, and whether you're a bit of a slag. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that word.
You can. You can say anything you like today, Sarah. I mean, God, it's medieval, isn't it?
It was like something out of the 1970s. You know what? Before I went into medicine, I thought that we lived in a new age, and I wasn't really a feminist. No. I thought we were past feminism.
It's not a generational thing. It's a type of man thing.
Yeah, and it's still there. And in many ways, I think it's worse now because we're constantly told that women are equal, but we're constantly told that you can speak out about these things, and Me Too's happened, and it's better now, and it isn't. I mean, I spoke out about it, and even when this was flagged to, really high people within the trust, they still kept going. It's worse now because it's so disingenuous.
And what do you do now?
I work as an administrator. I don't work in medicine anymore at all, which is really sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
Very sad. And do you know where he is? Prison, maybe?
No. So from what I know, I think he left the country and is still working as a doctor. Everyone involved in this, the HR people who are involved in this got promotions. The consultant who investigated me is continuing to work as a consultant and has had no repercussions at all. Everyone that I know involved in this has walked away, if anything, with their position improved, apart from me, because I made the mistake of reporting a sexual assault.
I get the feeling you don't think it was a mistake, though, for your own integrity. Or do you?
You know what? It's really difficult. I oscillate a lot between... I mean, I know who I am, and I have to be able to look myself in the mirror. And I've always been... I remember somebody once described me as admirably outspoken. But I've always been the sort of person who says, no, this is not acceptable. Yeah. I've got quite strong kind of drive there.
Yeah.
But, I think about what the converse would have been had I is the biggest mistake of my life walking into that office with him, or was the biggest mistake of my life actually reporting what happened in that office? Because if I hadn't have reported it,
well, you couldn't have imagined what he was going to do.
No,
no, you couldn't.
But then in reporting it, I didn't imagine that the trust was going to behave like that either. I remember one of my consultant colleagues who was a man, who was, much more senior than I was, much more secure in his position. He at one point, he called me up and he had a go at me and he said, you need to drop. It's fine you having these ideals. It's fine you having these, but you need to drop what you're doing against the trust, because don't raise your head above the parapet. You're making things really difficult for me and for the other people working.
Who said this to you?
Okay. This was a consultant. This was my friend who told me about the questions that he'd been asked about my relationships and my sex life, and I raised a complaint about what he told me. And then he said, I was making things really difficult for him and I needed to take a step back and consider the impact of my actions on others.
Everything that you have told us, Sarah, shows, I think, and I'm so sorry you had to leave medicine because of it, but it shows that perfectly, if you'll forgive my use of the word, it shows perfectly how skewed the whole thing is. A woman is sexually assaulted at work, and very quickly the conversation, including the conversation from her male friend consultant, the conversation is about sparing the boys, this distress and this uncomfortable, ugly situation, and sparing the actual perpetrator's career. And we don't want to wreck a doctor's career, do we? They all seem very relaxed about Sarah's career being wrecked, but not the boys. Never the boys.